End of year clearance sale. Come on down to the nearest store. You getting all this, cameraman? CBS cares. Hello again, Generation 1 Transformer fans. This is Sparkster1701, and now that we're all done enjoying the turkey and the football and everything else that we come to expect on Thanksgiving, it's time to move on and get ready for Christmas. So in the spirit of the frenzy of the holiday shopping, and I know that firsthand, I did 7 years in a retail store. Many of them I opened Friday, on Black Friday at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. That seems a bit petty now, but back then it was a big deal. So today our Transformer will be appropriately the Generation 1 Junkion leader, Wreck Gar. Wreck Gar, of course, was released in 1986, as a partial tie-in to the then-released Transformers the movie, and he would also be available in 1987. He would be discontinued in 1988, and we did not get a replacement for him. One of the biggest gripes that we have about Wreck Gar is that he's listed as a Junkion leader, and we did not get any Junkion troops for him to command. The same would be also said true of fellow movie actor Scourge. Scourge was listed as the sweeps leader on his 1986 packaging, and we did not get any generic sweeps. Sorry about that. So, in a lot of ways, these two guys, while being rather popular figures, they lost out on the fact that they had no generic troopers, or even any type of troopers, to command beneath them. Wasted opportunity by Hasbro. Another potential wasted opportunity comes from the various media pictures that were done of Wreck Gar to promote him. Like, say, his instructions here, they show him being able to hold his extra wheel on his elbow. But as you can see here on the sides, the holes here on his elbows do not go in very deep at all, so he cannot hold it whatsoever. As he just dropped it on my toes. He at least cannot hold it on his arm, but as a strange novelty, it can be plugged into his axe. And it gives his weapon kind of some sort of like a Mad Max feel or something. Doesn't look as dangerous, at least from that side, but turn it around to the other side and, well, comes off as either an overblown club or a stop sign. Maybe that could be Wreck Gar's future position. Traffic warden. Or the guy that stands out in the middle of the street and holds up the stop sign for kids to cross at a school crossing. That sounds about appropriate. Anyway, let's take a look at Wreck Gar's articulation, and even though he came out in 1986 when they were starting to cheapen the Transformer line, he does have a surprising amount of articulation. He has a ball and socket joint here at his shoulder, so it does allow for his shoulder to rotate all the way around. And he does have a joint here at the elbow. Plus, he has another joint at his wrist. So, he does have a lot of positioning that you can do for his arms. He has a slight joint here at the hip, so he can bring his legs up like that. And he does have one at the kneecap, but unfortunately it's more for transforming, so he just ends up bending his knees in the opposite direction. But then again, since Wreck Gar is supposedly built out of scrap and junk, maybe that's normal for him. Now we'll take a look at transforming Wreck Gar, and he is a bit more complicated than many of the others being released around this time, so bear with me on dealing with him. First things first, as usual, is to remove all of his accessories. We also need to separate the wheel from the axe. Do that here off camera. There we go. Alright, next we take his head and we start to move it up. We also want to close the faceplate in. Unfortunately, it's in a recessed area, so his face is hard to see. Rotate the headpiece till it goes straight up. And you'll also do that with this red metal piece. Then we'll take the engine cover, the engine here, on his chest, and we just pry it out a bit. All the while, also we got to fold his arms inward. Rotate the hands as need be, so that way the holes are sideways. And you have these little notches up top side. You gotta rotate the arms a little bit more and then get them rotated. So it should look like this, folks. That's the easiest way to do it. And then finally get the engine plate all the way out. There we go. Now that we got it out, we'll get the spare wheel here and just lower one of the arms so you can stick it in, and then rearrange it as necessary. We'll get it in final position in a moment when we work with his legs. Now his legs, we got to rotate them. We'll start with the left leg, rotate it up a bit so that we can take the wheel here and rotate it inward. Then you can bring up the right leg so that you can get the knee area into the post. I'd show you the hole in there, but it's pretty tricky to see. It's along the back of his knee. There it goes. And then you adjust the legs, as you can see here. Right above his ankle there is a hole, and those connect to the posts right here on the side of the engine. You will have to shift the lower legs here can be shifted outward, just like that. Show it to you again, make sure you can see it. They shift outward a bit to allow ample room to connect them. A little more forward there. There we go. We do the same thing with this leg. And adjust the wheels as necessary. And the saddlebags. And there we go. Wreck Gar is in his alternate mode, a motorcycle. Looks kind of silly. Be nice if it was capable of holding a rider of some type. Unfortunately, before you ask, no. Another one of Wreck Gar cannot ride on top of it. There is, as you saw earlier with the articulation, there is not enough articulation to allow Wreck Gar to ride another one of these. So, again, that feels like a wasted opportunity by Hasbro, since that scene was one of the more impressive ones to see for a new character introduction in the animated movie. So we can all remember Wreck Gar and his cronies chasing the Autobots all across the piles of scrap and debris, getting knocked off of each other, replacing parts quickly, and then quickly transforming to change roles. That always was a rather comical scene. As a motorcycle, thanks to the way his legs are positioned, he is capable of standing straight, standing up. He does lean a little bit to the side, but not enough to completely fall over. And even with him leaning a bit on either side, he still rolls pretty decently. It's not perfect, but it does work pretty good. And the next thing we're going to take a look at here are Wreck Gar's loose pieces. But before we do that, I'm going to show you something of a close-up view of his face. It's a matter of trying to get it in here and keep it out of the shadows. A little hard to see, but unfortunately they did not paint on any of the mustache and beard detail that Wreck Gar famously sported in the animated movie. So the toy unfortunately ends up looking more like a generic Junkion than it does our beloved character from the movie. Again, another wasted opportunity by Hasbro. Now we'll look at the accessories, and as was typical for many of the Transformer toys of his size, he does not have a whole lot of accessories. One that's not listed as one on the main page of his instructions, due to the fact he'd be in motorcycle mode when you bought him, is this. This is his front wheel. I put emphasis on that it is the front wheel, as the rear wheel is not intended to be removed. And it's the same on both sides, and gloriously, it's got rubber. It's a rubber tire. I mean, this thing can be taken off completely. I wouldn't recommend you do that very often, folks, but you can see this is rubber. This is rubber. This was when we were spoiled as kids, because it would be within the next year or so there would be no rubber tires on the Transformers. They did one in 1987 that had rubber tires. After that there was no more rubber tires. So this was a spoilage to still be able to get rubber wheels. I do not know if later Wreck Gar's got plastic ones, but I kind of doubt it, because the rear tire kind of needs to have rubber to be able to transform him easier. The plastic would just get bent, and it would make him impossible to roll. So this is spoilage here. Naturally, obviously, when you get one of these, make sure it still has that rubber on it. Next up, we have his weapon. This is his rifle. It's known as a decelerator laser. Supposedly, it slows down the electric impulses in a transformer, thus eventually paralyzing him. Not much to say about it, but it does have a ammo magazine pointing out at the bottom of it, so it's kind of a nice detail. Go around. Looks the same on both sides, and as it's a pretty good sized weapon, it shouldn't be too hard to find. Then lastly, we have what is known as his armor axe. As you can see, this is made of very thin plastic. Turn to the side here. It's rather thin, but it's sturdy. It's not bending as I hold on to it there. It is not bending. It's pretty sturdy, so you shouldn't find one too badly beat up on them. It's pretty much the same on both sides, although this is the side that obviously was from the bottom of the mold, since it has some of the extra bits of kibble there, little circles. This is the side that I kind of like to connect to the front wheel, so refer to it as the ugly side, and you just hide that side from view. And that is all of his accessories in a nutshell. Alright, now we'll take a look at Wreck Gar's instructions. And they're more or less in the same style that they had been started using in 1985. Unfold these out real quick. And we'll hold them up here for view. As you can see here, the instructions do not list the front wheel as being a separate piece, so always keep that in mind. I love this drawing there of the motorcycle. That's a rather impressive view of it. And then we go through the slow and somewhat painstaking process of transforming Wreck Gar. I didn't have the benefit of having Wreck Gar as a child. I bought him as an adult collector. He was one of the first ones after a chance encounter at the local flea market. And I was forever getting him totally straight. And then, of course, right here, and then it states the obvious up there. Note, front wheel is detachable. Then, of course, we get here, and it mentions that the front wheel can be used as a shield by fitting it into the fist. It's kind of, if it can go in the fist, why do they always show it in his elbow? Stupid. And right here, you can see Wreck Gar had quite a few stickers for a Transformer of his size. That would unfortunately get downsized on later Transformers, so this is a bonus here, folks. And right here, start with all the usual rubbish. Right here about the rub sign, which as you saw is on the left-hand side of the motorcycle. The robot points, there was still a bevy of offers with the robot points in 1986, and the information on how to read the tech specs. Now, before we go into his tech spec, let's get the tire out of the axe here. Let's see. Raise his arm up here a little bit. Yeah. Doesn't look too bad as a shield. Probably meant for the top side of his fist instead of down underneath, but yeah, this is Wreck Gar. He'd probably fashion that together sort of like the Goffy sticks that the Sand people use in Star Wars, since they were a combination of about 4 different things in one weapon. So something similar to that with Wreck Gar. I wouldn't put it past him. I would not put it past him. Looks kind of silly from this angle, but well, then again, so was Wreck Gar and the way he talks. More on that in a moment. Now we'll bring up his tech specs. We got a nice picture of Wreck Gar here. This would have been used from the front of the box. It's done up in red because they list him as an Autobot. And the toy, as you can see here on the side, there goes the wheel. He does have an Autobot insignia there, despite the fact that Wreck Gar is not an Autobot. Wreck Gar is a Junkion. I'm going to put it back in the axe, that way he doesn't drop it again. Wreck Gar is a Junkion, so he is of an independent faction to the Transformer War. They just helped the Autobots. That doesn't make them a part of the team necessarily, but what can we say? The toy makers are hesitant to give us fringe characters. They got to be good guys or bad guys. There can't be anybody that could switch sides unless that was their specific purpose. But anyway, it was done in red. They made him an Autobot. It gives his name as Wreck Gar, and his function is Junkion Leader. His motto is collect and save, collect and save. Basically, a cheesy way to remind us to collect and save our robot points. Wreck Gar leads the Junkions, a race of junk robots. He's made of rusted scraps, chassis bits, manifold parts, and dented odds and ends. A little scatterbrained. Seriously? He speaks in odd-rhyming, pieced-together sentences. His words are a junkyard collection of broadcast fragments from TV commercials and radio jingles. In robot mode, he carries an armor axe and a decelerator laser that inhibits an enemy robot's flow of cerebral impulses. Moving right along here, we'll lay the decoder over the grid and we'll get a look at Wreck Gar. And it lists his strength as 8. His intelligence is 7, so he's pretty smart for a guy that talks television all the time. His speed is 6. His endurance is 10. His rank is 7. His courage is 8. His firepower and skill are both 7s. So all in all, Wreck Gar here is a pretty powerful character. Now we get to the portion that everybody seems to enjoy so much. What do I think of him? Wreck Gar is an interesting character and has always been a fan favorite. From his first appearance in the animated Transformers the movie, where he was voiced by Monty Python actor Eric Idle, and he talked oftentimes in random jingles and such that came from the various Earth television commercials that we were all accustomed to in the 1980s. And proudly boasted to the Autobots that he talked TV. Unfortunately, we got to hear Cup talk TV, and the less said about that, the better. As it turns out, Junkions like Wreck Gar are constantly adding other parts to their bodies, so that explains his high endurance. He's got so much armor all over him, it's really hard to tell whether or not you've hit a vital area to his life, or if you've just hit a scattered pile of crap and junk that he has added on to himself. While he appeared as somewhat as a suspicious character when they first appeared, since they spent part of the movie just watching the Autobots and only attacked them after the Decepticons launched their successful bid to recapture the Matrix, we were left to wonder exactly what Wreck Gar was, until Hot Rod and the others appeared and used that silly universal greeting. Then they all of a sudden became allies and friends, leading to that rather ridiculous dance montage with Weird Al Yankovic's Dare to Be Stupid song. Again, the less said, the better. In more of the recent comics and some of the recent novels, Wreck Gar is depicted as being somewhat smarter, still talking in assorted jingles and such, but he's also more suspicious of outsiders. Apparently, in some of the other media, he has been betrayed. His trust has been violated and betrayed, so he's suspicious of anybody that comes to junk that isn't an open Junkion. As a toy, Wreck Gar's pretty impressive. He's a nice, tall, standing figure, as you can see here from the camera, and he does have a amazing amount of articulation, a bit more than many of the others that was sold at the same price point. So that makes him a pretty impressive figure. I'm going to go ahead and say that he's a top tier figure, but unfortunately it's going to be more towards the bottom end of the top tier, as the lack of being able to have him ride another Wreck Gar figure, and the lack of any troops for him to follow to lead into battle is a big hindrance to the enjoyment of the toy. Hasbro really dropped the ball when they brought him out. Nonetheless, there's also the fact that the lack of any paint on the face to make him look more like the character seen in the movie, that hurts him a bit, but not enough to take him off the top tier status. This is a must-have figure, folks. And that concludes my review of the Generation 1 Junkion leader Wreck Gar. If you liked the video, thumbs up it here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Post a comment, share this video with your friends and fellow collectors, and help support and keep this channel going. This is Sparkster1701 saying catch you all later.